Good evening. Welcome. Good evening. Having some issues with my mic, so I'm holding it, so it's a little different. Welcome to another riveting edition of The Ghost and the Goat. I'm your host, Buddy Thayer. I'm the paranormal investigator in this duet of hosts, if you will. My co-host Bams, however, he's the sports guy. I'm the paranormal investigator. He's been on a bit of a health hiatus the last month and a half or so now. So there was some talk of him possibly making it to tonight's show. No rush to, not a big deal. You get back on when you get back on. Plenty of sports to talk about now. I don't know if we're gonna have sports on this evening. If Bams happens to join us, we'll do a little bit of sports. There's a lot going on in sports. If not, let me just throw this at you really quick. The Red Sox are down 3 games in the wild card race. We need Minnesota to lose. We need Kansas City to lose. We need Baltimore to lose this evening because we're playing them. We need a couple other teams to lose. They just need to play a little bit better baseball. Trevor Story came back. Didn't really see that happening, but that's kind of a plus. Maybe things will happen. Maybe things won't happen. This is the 5-year anniversary. Yesterday was actually the 5-year anniversary of the Red Sox firing of Dave DeBron, Dave Dave Dabrowski. He was our general manager. He came in. They said, "Hey, we want you to build a team and take us to the World Series." He's like, "Okay," and he did that. And then the next year, he kind of like, meh. And they're like, "Hey, we want a winner," and they got rid of him. And he went on to Philadelphia, home of my co-host Bam's his team, the Phillies, and built holy shit, a championship team down there in Philly. They've made the playoffs 3 years in a row, and they've been like home or like World Series favorites the entire season. So big shout out to John Henry. Good job, dude. You really a lot of insight on that one. Yeah, no, I don't know if my Red Sox are going to do anything this year, but continue to disappoint us good Red Sox fans. The NFL season, a little bright spot started yesterday. Yesterday it started this past weekend. Actually Thursday night it started with Baltimore and Kansas City. I picked Baltimore to win. They didn't win. Kansas City won. Um, Maybe more regularly, you'll see when Bams comes back, we'll do the whole host of games for the week, and we'll pick who we think is going to win. I'm always picking on my Dolphins. My Dolphins, they won this week, but they had some difficulties getting there. Um, Tyreek Hill had a little bit of difficulty getting to the stadium, but he ended up getting there. I don't know, just like the Patriots. I didn't pick the Patriots to win. I thought they would get slaughtered, dude. Cincinnati, like, what happened to you guys? They fell apart, and the Patriots took one win. I don't see them winning a whole lot of games this year. I actually enjoy not seeing the Patriots win a lot of games, being a Dolphins fan. But we'll see what we see. So paranormal now. Back to the paranormal. Before I get into tonight's show, I just want to give a big shout out to Joe Britlin. He's our God. He's the other half of Bams on the mid card, the wrestling show that they have on Friday nights. When Bams is here, of course, he's the video um, production expert of Three Dudes Brews, the other podcast that we run. Tune into Three Dudes Brews for episode 5 as we. I think we're doing our camping trip. We did like a tasting challenge of light beers. Usually we go to different breweries. This month we're going to be filming at Black Mountain Brews in Eastern Connecticut, and you can see that the beginning of October we'll be back to going to local breweries, talking to brewers about their great beers, drinking their fantastic beers with them, and hopefully Joe will be back on board. But Joe is big shout out to Joe Britlin and his wife Kara as they're expecting their first baby, Emma Lynn. She's due to be born sometime the end of this month. Kara, we know you're laid up. Take it easy, lady. Joe, take care of your girl, dude. We got things here down at the van by the Riv. Big shout out to them. We're thinking about you. Best of luck to you guys. But tonight's guest, whether Bams joins me or not, he's coming to me from about the same area as Bams, the lovely South Coast of Massachusetts. He's the host of the Midnight Society and one of the founders of Midnight.fm online radio network. He is also the host and co-creator of Spooky Southcoast. It's one of the world's longest running radio programs on the topic of the paranormal. He also was the last successor of the legendary Art Bell and the original incarnation of Bell's Midnight in the Desert program. In addition to his radio work, Tim also serves as paranormal editor at ultimateunexplained.com, a website covering the paranormal and true crime, something that I plan on addressing this evening. Um, he has worked as a writer, researcher, and producer on the popular paranormal television programs like Ghost Stalkers, Ghost Asylum, and Haunted Towns. He is also a regular on screen commentator on Travel Channel's Hotel Paranormal and the Weather Channel's Weird Earth. He has been featured on programs such as Ghost Adventures, My Ghost Story, Most Haunted Towns, Monster Quest, and he's in the documentary The Bridgewater Triangle. He is also the author of Ghosts of the South Coast and co-author of Haunted Objects, Stories of Books on Your Shelf. Please welcome to the show. Good guy, awesome dude. Awesome for the paranormal. Tim Weisberg. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Well, thanks for having me, buddy. And now after that introduction with all my accomplishments and my resume there's no time left in the show. So thanks for having me. See you next time.
Dude, what a resume. You get around, kid.
Listen, my whole thing is if I ever stop working, I'll probably die. So I just keep working. That's the way that I do it. I have a very big work ethic that was instilled in me by my parents. And the fact that I can utilize it to do fun stuff in the paranormal is just a bonus.
Absolutely. So you've been in radio forever. You've been in the paranormal forever. Which have you been in longer? Have you been in radio? Is that been your passion? Is that?
Yeah. So as a kid, I always wanted to get involved in radio. I used to like sit there and make my own radio station in my bedroom. I had 2 tape players and I would play a song on one and I'd record it on the other with myself talking into it, talking over the song. And then I would make that tape and then I'd play it in the boombox out the window of my apartment complex.
Oh,
and I called it WMAX, the max of your dial setting, even though we weren't actually on the radio. And so that was something that I was always all about. And when I started as a sports writer back in 1998, the first thing that I wrote about was professional wrestling. And one of the local radio stations was creating a sports show and they wanted me to come on and talk wrestling. And I said, okay, well, I want to come in, and they made me a co-host. So that got my foot in the door. And then, now it's 22 years later and I run the radio station. So I guess if you stick around long enough, by default, you're the only one left to be in charge.
I guess you do a few different. Now you're still, you do the thing at in New Bedford, right? The AM radio. You're still into that?
Yep, WBSM New Bedford. That's my day job. I am the the old radio term is program director. Now we call it brand manager, but that's my job. And then I'm also the morning show host.
Oh wow, look at you! And you do Spooky Southcoast, which has been on since the beginning of time. That's that's an internet radio, correct?
That's on WBSM as well, but then we also podcast. It's on Saturday nights, but we've been on hiatus because I had some health issues earlier this year, and I got cancer and ended up taking time off from the show and just haven't gone back yet.
Oh wow! And Midnight FM, is that also on pause, or
that kind of died a slow death? So that we had the old Art Bell subscription model of we're going to charge people a monthly subscription to get access to the show, and after the pandemic was over, people just fell off. So, and we've, now that I'm on in the morning, I can't do a weeknight, 3-hour night paranormal show, like I was doing. So I had to scale back on something. So that ended up being the thing I scaled back on. But, the shows are still out there for, eventually we'll release them all on podcast for free so everybody can hear them, because we did some great shows over the years.
Oh, of course. So when did you get drawn into the paranormal? Did you have an experience? Did you grow up in a haunted house? Were you pulled in by a friend? How did it work for you, Tim?
For me, it started, it was kind of a lifelong thing. So as a young kid, I was having experiences, old hag syndrome, as they call it, where I would see the shadow on the wall over my crib. And I remember there being all these little weird things that would happen to me over the years, but I never realized that there was actually something to this until, that commercial came on TV for Time Life's Mysteries of the Unknown.
Right.
And my uncle had the first book of that at my grandmother's house on ghosts. And I read it and I realized, like, this is a thing and people study it. And so from that point on, I was kind of the weird and learning all this. But then as a teenager, my aunt and uncle bought a haunted house in the Bridgewater Triangle. And then I started having regular experiences there. And that led to me really believing in it. And then in 2004, Ghost Hunters premieres on TV. And then I'm like, well, not only is this real, but there's everyday people that are going out there and looking into this.
Right.
So then I started becoming, kind of an armchair investigator, and then eventually a full-fledged investigator and researcher.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so you don't what Ghost Hunters did for people, it made you realize you didn't have to be like Dr. Spangler and have like a research program at NYU to be studying like the paranormal. It gave everybody that opportunity, like, hey, you can go out and do this too. And
Yeah.
I mean they did not that I can say like every episode of like Ghost Hunters was like on point or whatever, but there's definitely some controversy that's around some of the episodes, some of the seasons, obviously, but being a show about entertainment, of course. But I mean, just the first couple seasons were honestly, to see them go out, they go out to a house, to a family's house, and they'd be like, no, your house isn't haunted, and this is maybe what's causing it. And it's like, oh wow, they're like going, they're making you like, no, this isn't like your house is possessed by a demon and they're gonna take over. And like I've heard like horror stories about people who have like been like investigators and like will go into people's houses and tell them like awful things just to like promote their own self on like YouTube. I mean, what they're even getting out of this is other than absolutely like sabotaging the people that are living there and make them,
Well,
it's just I don't know.
I'll tell you, though, I've struggled a lot with that over the years with the people who, find a demon at every place they investigate, and like,
Hmm.
what's that all about? And for a long time, I thought, most of them were just looking to self promote. But I think part of it is when you have a hobby, and that's what this is for everybody. It's a hobby. It's not a
Hmm.
job. And when you have a hobby that you dedicate a lot of time and money to, you don't want to feel like you went out there fruitlessly. You don't
Right.
want to
That's
go,
true.
you're not going to go out and spend all the money on golf clubs and a golf bag and golf lessons to get out there, hit 2 holes and then go home. You're going to
Hmm.
play 9 holes or 18 holes or maybe 36 holes. And so it's kind of the same way with the paranormal. People don't want to think that they spent all this time and money and hours of research ahead of time and get to a place and nothing happens. So that
Yeah.
leads to them, finding something where there might not be anything just to
Hmm.
kind of satisfy themselves. And now the downside to that is like you said, they are working with people who live in homes and are looking for help and they're misleading them. But I
Right.
don't know that it's as intentional as I mean, sometimes certainly it is. There's a lot of
Yeah.
people who are just trying to get themselves attention,
Mhm.
and they have no problem hurting somebody else to do it. But I think for the most part, people just they didn't want to. They didn't like the fact that they signed up for a hobby where nothing happens, which if they were
Unfortunately.
fishermen and they
Yeah.
bought all the fishing gear and a boat and went out there and didn't catch anything, they'd be like, "Hey, a good day of fishing beats a bad day at work,
Right.
or a bad day of fishing beats a good day at work." And I look at it the same way with ghost hunting.
Absolutely. You get something out of it, whether you learn about a location or you can help somebody get through something that maybe isn't paranormal. I think that's really great. Now, you talk about the Bridgewater Triangle. I know what the Bridgewater Triangle is. You know what the Bridgewater Triangle is, having grown up in the area. Define what is the Bridgewater for some of our viewers who aren't from the Bridgewater region. What is the Bridgewater Triangle, Tim?
So the term came about in the 1970s. Lauren Coleman was a cryptozoologist. I think most people know his work.
Hmm.
And he was studying all the strange phenomena that was happening in New England. And he zeroed in on the fact that a lot of stuff was happening in this area of Bridgewater, Massachusetts. Now, there's East Bridgewater, there's West Bridgewater, and there's Bridgewater proper. And they made a natural triangle. And at the time, the Bermuda Triangle was hugely popular. So Lauren coined the term Bridgewater Triangle. And then he wrote about it in his 1983 book, Mysterious America. And for a long time, nobody really talked about it ever again. It was just one of those kind of, oh, here's a neat little thing in this book, but nobody really looked into it as a paranormal vortex until in the early 2000s. There were a couple of gentlemen who started websites, Christopher Balzano, Chris Pittman.
Hmm.
They started researching the triangle and collecting all the stories, and they really brought it back to the forefront. Aaron Cadieux was a local college student that was studying film. He saw some of their work. He made a little documentary about it for class called Inside the Bridgewater Triangle.
Hmm.
And then we happened to find that, and we brought him onto the show, and we brought those guys onto the show when we first started. And before you know it, the Bridgewater Triangle became a phenomenon. Not taking all the credit for it, but we did an annual episode every year about it, and many episodes throughout the years about it. And then Aaron and Manny Familare decided to make the feature-length documentary. And then that's when it really started to blow up. So this is a place where every bit of paranormal activity can happen. So it's what
Right.
John Keel, the Mothman Prophecies researcher, would call a window area. So you get ghosts, you get alien abductions, you get UFO sightings, you get cryptid creatures, you get strange stories and legends like the Pukwudgie. And then you also have that bit of intersection of true crime, mental illness. The fact that there is more mental illness in the Bridgewater Triangle per capita than there is anywhere else in Massachusetts is something that still, makes me think, is the triangle the cause of all this, or is the triangle a symptom of all this? So it's a fascinating thing. And while other people have kind of given it hard definitions and hard borders, I look at the triangle as something that's continuously growing and evolving. And the
Right.
more we talk about it, the more we're contributing to it.
I think well, you said it started in the Three Bridgewaters, so it now I hear about like triangle activity and like as far as Rehoboth, like that the
Mhm.
hitchhiker on 44, or down like down by Acushnet and down by Fall River and maybe even as far out as New Bedford. But when you were talking about the Bridgewater thing and the whole psychological thing about the area of Bridgewater, I find that a little fascinating because for 6 years, I called Bridgewater State Hospital my home. That was not that I lived there. I was I worked there. It's the forensic facility for Massachusetts. It is in comparison to Rhode Island. I live in Rhode Island. I now work in Rhode Island, but in comparison to the one in Rhode Island, we have Eleanor Slater, which is maybe 35 beds. In Massachusetts, it's pushing 150 if and they have room to add extra. There is a lot of mentally ill people that are living there. There's also a lot of people that cycle in and out of there. People who will come in atrocious, will get on a good dosage of meds after a period of like violent and unstable behavior, and then they go down from the max unit. Whereas where I worked, so I saw a lot of people at their worst times to the minimum units, and then they graduate and they leave. They go to DMH, and they get out of Department of Mental Health, and they get like Taunton State Hospital, and they get out of there, and then they go into like a group home or a halfway house, and they would steadily wean off the meds, and they would go back onto the other drugs that they were using that would completely turn their lives into shit again, and they'd end up breaking the law, and they end up back at Bridgewater. But there was just like in comparison to Rhode Island or like I know the one in even Vermont, I believe, is smaller. It is a larger, much larger facility in Massachusetts, and a lot of them do come from that. Like a lot of them are from Brockton. Honestly, a lot of the people that call that home are from the
And
Brockton area. But
just think, like, you came into it at a time when, and I'm just assuming this based on your age, but you came into it at a time when they'd already had a large shutdown of a lot of the other facilities in
yep,
Massachusetts. But we used to have facilities really in every other town.
yeah,
There was an asylum in Plymouth. There was an asylum in Hanover and Orwell.
yep,
And these are all like a stone's throw from Bridgewater. So there was
yep.
really multiple facilities, and a lot of those facilities, they've now turned them into apartment complexes and
hmm
condos and all that. So people are living in this place where at one point, it was just some of the most horrific conditions. Have you ever seen the film Titicut Follies? Have you ever seen that?
I have seen that when I worked there. I did see that movie. Bridgewater, like it's just it was like a farming community for a while, and a prison community, and just like the things that they did to people in like the 1920s was absolutely horrific.
Yeah.
Um,
And that all left a stain on these buildings,
mhm,
most of which are still around in some form or another, at least part of the facilities. And so that, I think, while I don't know if that's the cause of the triangle activity, I think it's more an effect. I think that also kind of amplifies and energizes all this activity because that traumatic energy has been imprinted on the land,
mhm.
and it's just going to keep cycling and keep charging things up for decades to come.
For sure. I can tell you that I've been in other facilities like the Eleanor Slater up at Walham Lake in Rhode Island. It gives me the heebie-jeebies walking in certain buildings. Just like, oh god, I feel like somebody's standing like right on top of me. Like there's that not so good feeling when it kind of as an investigator it is a good feeling, but I mean like that. Ugh, like I think there's something here feeling there at the lad school or the lad school grounds now. Even the ground, you walk around the ground and you still feel that like that tension, almost like that anger. People get angry going there, and it's just a wide open field. You wouldn't even know if you didn't know all the atrocities that happened on that piece of property. You'd have no idea where you were. It's just I something about like the land holding on to the energy that you think that's the thing if with the Bridgewater Triangle. Yes, yeah, all
It
the King Philip's War, all the
is,
wars that
but
the
I also
Indians had.
think right, exactly. And I think part of that is we might be the victims of whatever energies have been here forever, but we
Hmm.
also have really done our part to make sure that those energies keep getting fed. We haven't exactly been the best stewards and the best people on this land,
True.
to each other and to the land itself. So in a way, we've caused a lot of the tragedy of the triangle, but the triangle itself just may be tragic in nature from the very get-go. Just as there's some places that feel magical and some places feel
Hmm.
special and some places feel like, oh, this is the greatest place on earth. Not Disney World, but places that are more natural feel. At the same time, there's got to be the opposite of that. There's got to be the yin to the yang, and so there's going to be places that just feel desolate and desperate, and that's what I think the Bridgewater Triangle is.
Now, even before, I mean, like with man's history, with the European settlers' history, as was pretty awful. But I mean, even before we came here, the Wampanoag called it places Hogmark. They go places where spirits dwell. Right. That's the definite. That's the translation of Hockomock Swamp. So I mean, you think that if the natives, even they can trace back this area to for how many generations? Have you looked into the Native American history of the land or any of
Um,
the?
I'm not sure how far back that they felt that way about it, but certainly by the time the Europeans arrived, they felt that way.
Mm,
There's a story that I like to tell when I'm talking about, the Freetown State Forest
yep.
and at one point the Lizzie Borden house was on land that is the same forest that was the same forest that became the Freetown State Forest,
Yep.
and there were no Native American encampments right there at the mouth of
The
the
Taunton
Taunton
River.
River. And
Yeah.
you would have thought that that would have been a place where they would have gone and spent their summers and fished and all that, but they avoided that area because they knew the darkness and the negativity that was there. So you already had an area that was cursed, for lack of a better term. I don't know if anybody ever cursed it. There is that theory that when the wampum belt was stolen from the
Mm,
Wampanoag people at the end of King
yep.
Philip's War, that was the curse of the Bridgewater Triangle. But I think the Bridgewater Triangle started long before that,
Hmm.
and that's why when the white settlers wanted to buy the Bridgewater property from Massasoit, he kind of laughed and he was like, "Sure, you're going to give me all that stuff for this place that we don't want anything to do with? Absolutely." And I've
Wow.
actually seen with my own eyes the original treaty that Massasoit signed with the colonists, and just being in the presence about something like that, you can kind of feel like that was a document where he basically said, "Yeah, good luck with that, boys."
Hmm. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Certain artifacts, certain pieces of history hold that energy. I volunteer my time at a local museum in East Greenwich, and they have things. They have a flag. It's the second oldest flag in North America. It was carried by Colonel Byfield. He ended up founding the town of Bristol, but he led several regiments and companies through the King Philip's, the King Anne's, and the Queen Anne's and the King George's War up in Maine there, where they like totally annihilated the Abenaki. But you almost like you almost feel that energy. You feel like that spirits, that energy can have an attachment to items.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a whole book about it, mainly because my theory on the idea of items holding in energy
Yeah,
is that we bond with those items for whatever reason. So obviously, in that case, it's they cared so much for that they lived and died for that flag.
yeah,
So every fiber of their being was dedicated to it. But that could also be as simple as I wrote about a haunted butter dish that a grandmother gave to her granddaughter, and the granddaughter felt like her grandmother was attached to that butter dish because it was the connection between them. So yeah, I think not only can objects be haunted, but we can intentionally put our energies into them
mm,
to try to make sure that we live on through these so what I'm looking for, kind of um almost like avatars for us, the kind
yep,
of these symbols of who we were.
yep. No, it's absolutely fascinating. You talked a little bit about Lizzie Borden. I want to get into that a little bit. Being my co-host is from Fall River, and we talk about the Lizzie Borden case and the Lizzie Borden house and the haunting that is. I've been to the house a few times myself, never for paranormal reasons. I'm a big history guy, so I just wanted to like kind of check it out. But what are your thoughts on the Lizzie Borden case? Was she guilt? Did she do it, Tim? What do you think?
So it's a bit of a cop out, but I always say, my job isn't to decide if she was guilty or innocent. My job is just to chronicle the ghosts that happened there.
Okay.
And I do feel that, from a legal perspective, she was acquitted. So
Yep.
as far as history is concerned, she's not guilty.
Sure.
My friend Amanda Millette, who is a fascinating person who has really studied the case, she feels very strongly that Lizzie Borden was not guilty.
Mm.
And based on that, I would have to say, she's not guilty. But at the same time, I also think, well, who else really had the opportunity? And there wasn't really any other kind of convincing sign that somebody else was in the house.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, it's a mystery that will never get solved. And that's why
Right.
people keep going back to it, because we don't like an unsolved mystery, but this is one that we'll never actually know the truth about.
Exactly. I mean, you can speculate. I mean, there was possible abuse involved. The stepmother, there wasn't a really great relationship there. Um, Lizzie was kind of like she never married him. She's a little bit odd for the times, I guess. She wanted more. She wanted to flaunt the money a little bit more. That her father was a little bit more modest. But as far as the ghosts go at the Lizzie Borden house, that it used to be a bed and breakfast. Is it still a bed and breakfast? The house itself in Fall River?
So now they call it the Lizzie Borden house. They call it
Mhm.
the Lizzie Borden house now because they don't include breakfast with your overnight stay anymore. And,
Oh, okay.
and most of the people who are coming through on their nightly ghost tours as opposed to actually spending the night there. But it's still the same idea. There's still the bedrooms that you can rent out and sleep in. So it's a bed and breakfast, but just doesn't actually include the breakfast, I guess. It's
Okay.
it's
So
extra.
having known you say you know the ghosts at the Lizzie Borden, can you talk a little bit about that? Having identified them or how you identified them?
Yeah, I mean, we've investigated, and I will say that it's without a doubt haunted. I don't
Mhm.
know necessarily who the spirits are there. I know that they've identified themselves as Lizzie Borden, Andrew Borden, Abby Borden, John Morse, but there's something darker that lives in that building, that lives in that
Mhm.
home, that I think is like an elemental energy that was there before the murders and has been there after the murders and will perform for you because it feeds off that negative energy that we bring when we're talking about the murder. So it's definitely a haunted place. I don't know what it's like now. The new owner who came in a few years ago has changed things up quite a bit.
Yep.
And I haven't investigated there since then, but
Mhm.
I do feel that it was a place that was one of the few times I could say I can almost guarantee you a paranormal experience at this place.
Really? I've met people who haven't experienced anything, and other people who said it was the best place they ever went to. So I've always been on the fence because I want to say it was a little pricey. Maybe I'm just I don't I'm not sure, but I've heard
No,
about
it is.
somebody talking about like the property next door, something awful and violent happening over there too. So maybe you're right. Maybe there is something connected to the land over there in Fall
Well,
River that's just
and it's interesting because I think a lot of people know the story of Lizzie Borden
yep.
and the fact that her father and stepmother were killed. They were shot by a hatchet, and but there was actually a murder that happened in the house next door in 1848 that
Hmm.
was a relative of Andrew Borden.
Hmm.
His I forget the exact connection, but he's like a nephew or uncle of Andrew Borden, and his second wife Eliza Borden um, went crazy one day. We'd probably call that postpartum depression now, and
Hmm.
she brought her three children down into it. She tried to drown the three of them in the cistern, killing two of them, and then slit her own throat.
Jesus.
And so now that building has become Miss Lizzie's Coffee. It's now a coffee shop.
Oh yeah,
And
right,
the
right.
owner of the coffee shop, Joe, he'll let people go down there and investigate. We've had a few investigations there and ran a paranormal event there. And the spirits that are there have really come out and made contact with us because all those years they were having to kind of go next door to get people's attention. Now they know that people are coming to see them in their home. And we're actually working on, trying to eliminate some of the stigma about Eliza Borden and her mental illness, and try to get people to be more understanding that, just postpartum depression was something we didn't understand then.
Right. There's a lot of mental illnesses that people really didn't understand. Until the last 50 years or so. Even like things like schizophrenia was just like people just like put in asylums and just like locked away from society completely. It's just being somebody that works in mental health. It's honestly nice to see how far things that people have come, how normal quote unquote of a life that people can live, despite their mental illnesses, despite the stigmas that absolutely crush them. It's kind of mind numbing to think about it, but yeah, it's various illnesses that but just the way people have been treated over the past god hundreds of years. So yeah.
But as you know, we could still do a lot more.
Oh, of course. Oh, of course we could. Yeah. Awareness. I had a good friend of mine. Not a close friend. A kid I grew up with over the weekend. I was away and I came back from Maine yesterday, and it's all over Facebook, obviously. But he's 42 years old. He hung himself. It's just like, oh God, man. If I would have known you could have called me, I would have sat there and listened to you all day. There's so much more we could have done for this guy, and now we're all kicking ourselves in the ass because like. Shit, man. There was a warning sign here. There was a warning sign there. It's like, oh God, you don't really even mental illness is difficult, and people don't address it maybe as much as they should. But there's absolutely help out there. So, and these services are widely available. To people
And that's something that we encounter in the paranormal too, where a lot of times people will call in folks because they feel like there's ghosts in their house or something. And in actuality, it's probably their own mental illness. So I used to tell people all the
Right.
time when, they'd say, what's the most important thing for a paranormal investigator to have? And I actually learned this from Kristen Gartland from TAPS way back in the day. It's the big book of pills, because when you go to somebody's house
Oh
to
God.
kind of do an intake for their investigation, you should really be asking the kind of questions like, excuse me, is there any history of mental illness? What medications are the people who live in the home on? And if people feel like that is too intrusive for you to be asking, then they
Yep.
don't really want the help,
Right.
because those are important questions to ask. And then you can look up whatever medications they're taking in that book and see, well, it causes hallucinations, it causes paranoia.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that they're not experiencing something, but it's still something you have to keep in the back of your head, not only for the safety of, you don't want to feed into their mental illness if it's there, but also for your own safety, in case you come back and
Yes.
say, well, there's nothing going on, and they're so convinced that there is, that they might turn on you. So,
And
it's for your safety too.
Tim, I've had the displeasure of seeing that happen. I went with a local demonologist. He wanted me to come in as a consult for a woman. He's like, I don't know if she's mentally ill, or I don't know if she's actually. So I'm like, yeah, sure. So she's talking to us. She's crying. She's upset. She's like having all this stuff happen in the basement. Her son lives in the basement. Her son's not home, and she finally decides that she's going to take us in the basement. She's so upset. She's so distraught. Just sitting there listening to her. She sounded somewhat lucid. Her experiences were a little bit out there, but that's usually what negative experiences are. They're pretty wild sometimes. And then we go downstairs and like the voice changes. Like she goes from, oh man, it's sweet, like, oh my God, she like, it's like, what's going on? And then she throws herself at the demonologist and puts her hands on his neck. And I was like, honestly, I was like gonna go put my hands on her and put her in restraint. And then she backed up and she stopped. And I had one of the guy Joe, who I talked about in the beginning of the show, and he was with me, and he almost shit his pants. He's like, dude, I didn't know what the hell she was gonna do. I don't know either. She could be trying to prove herself. Come to find out, the woman had been recently discharged from Butler Hospital, and she wasn't exactly all there to begin with. So, yeah, mental health awareness is absolutely huge, especially when you go into people's houses. As an investigator, you don't know them from, usually it's like somebody like refers them to you, or they see your website, or they see something you do, and like, hey, let me give this guy a call. And it's all well and good, but there's those, oh my god, there's those, oh my god times when you don't know. It's scary. It's definitely scary. It's definitely scary for sure.
That's why I don't take residential cases. I've done one residential case in my entire career, 20 years of doing this. And that was because Andrew Lake asked me to go along and do
Oh
one.
yeah.
And so I went, just to get that. He thought it was important that I get that experience. And I was probably 15 years in when we did this.
Wow.
And it was such an odd experience. The woman was a hoarder. She had, family living with her, and she was bedridden, and
Oh
like, it was
god.
just every bad experience you could think, would be there. Like when you're walking in, like, I don't want to, I mean, it's the hottest day of the year and they
Yep.
barely had any air conditioning, like just little things like that.
Yep.
But you could tell that she needed help so badly. She just needed to get answers, and you're not sure you can give those to her. So for me, I've always shied away from those cases, because to take on a residential case, you have to be available for those people. When you just don't go in one and done. You have to be
No.
available when something else happens, and when they call you at 2 a.m. And my schedule just doesn't permit that. So I've stuck to historical places
Yep.
and businesses and places that, I can also bring in somebody else too and say, they're your point person. I'm just here to kind of see what's going on.
Yeah, that's so you talk about doing historical places. I mean, I love doing historical places because one, it's historical, and that's my tie in here with the paranormal. But I like to also raise money. I know you do a lot of fundraising for historical locations. Um, any place you're doing anything upcoming, Tim? You what do you got going on?
So we have one coming up October 12th in North Andover, Mass, which used to be part of Salem back in the old days. It was part
Oh
of the
yeah.
Salem Village. And so this is the Parson Barnard House. And this was, for years, they would say that Reverend Thomas Barnard, who lived in this house,
Mm,
was one of the accusers in the Salem witch trial. And Salem witch trials, we used to go to that house under that um, assumption, and we would like really lay into this guy's spirit, and
yep.
it would be like one type of activity. And then the historical society realized they were wrong, and he was actually somebody who was trying to exonerate the people who were accused.
Mm,
And so we went back with this new information, and we changed our approach, and the place just lit up for us.
wow.
And then there's also, it used to be a boys' school after that. And the former headmaster, Simeon Putnam, his spirit still lives on in the attic and makes some very weird things happen. So we're excited to get back there October 12th. And then October 19th, I'm going to give you some breaking news, because we haven't announced this yet
Ooh,
formally. But we're going to go back to, I do this event now every year in Sandwich, Massachusetts on Cape Cod, called Spooky Sandwich. And this is going to be the first time they've had a big paranormal event like this at the Daniel Webster Inn,
wow.
at the Old Town Hall, and the Old Town Hall Annex. So we're going to have, and the Old Town Hall Annex, this is the last time we're ever going to be able to only time we're ever going to be able to investigate there, because they're in the process of selling that building. And so we're going to get to do all three of those locations, plus have a really great catered buffet dinner at the Daniel Webster Inn.
Oh
There'll be
wow.
discounted rooms for people that want to stay at the inn. And I've stayed there last year. It's amazing. And so this is going to be on October 19th. So
Wow.
all the information, the October 12th event in North Andover is already for sale at SpookySouthcoast.com. And the other event will be on sale at SandwichChamber.com, probably within the next week or so.
That's amazing. And you're the money goes back to these organizations, Tim. Yeah.
Yeah. So what we've always done is we've given back a portion of the money, because it
Yeah.
costs money to put these events on.
Of course. Yeah.
And what people don't realize, one of the biggest expenses is when we have to get our own insurance. I've
Mhm.
paid as much as $500 for one night's coverage of insurance. So
Jesus.
this is all, and we don't just run events like, you pay the $50 or $100 to come in, and then, you're on your own. We bring in dinner, we bring in snacks, drinks, and it's all included with it. We bring
Wow.
in equipment for you to use. We give you batteries if the batteries die in your devices. Like we make sure that we're kind of full service. So that costs a little bit of money too. And then of course, our time is worth money for all the promotion we do. But over the years, we probably don't, if I had to guess, I would say, when Jeff Belanger and I were running legend trips together, we used to always say
Mhm.
we'd raised over $30,000 to help these places. And we haven't done an event together probably in almost 10 years. So
Oh,
we're
wow.
talking about, now we're probably close to like $50,000 that we've raised for these historic places over the years.
That's amazing, dude. That's amazing because a lot of these locations don't have an outlet that will raise money for them. We did stuff for East Greenwich Historical Society. It was like a group of older people that had this
Mhm.
tremendous like appreciation for the history of East Greenwich, and they didn't have a pot to piss in when it came to money, when it came to funding. So they were looking for funding, and they were looking for ways to bring money in. I'm like, hey, your place is like wicked haunted. Like we've had experiences there. We know people who have seen spirits there. We've investigated there a few times. I'm like, we'll let people in. We'll bring them in. We'll give them some equipment if they don't have it. We'll give them the whole experience. It's not always what the public doesn't understand. It's not always like just because you go into a haunted location doesn't mean you're going to experience something. You just
Right.
sometimes you're just sitting in the dark talking to yourself. But we'll give them the whole nine, and it feels good at the end of the day to be able to give back like that, especially these fledgling organizations. Really,
Um, I mean, I'll point to my hometown historical society, the Wareham Historical Society. They have a building from 1690 called the Fearing Tavern, super haunted, and they just don't have a lot of fundraising ability. So we would do this event for them that became their second biggest fundraiser every year behind their 4th of July Antiques Fair. And
hmm
so they started to kind of depend on that money. But
hmm
now the problem is so many of the members have died off since COVID that they haven't gotten new people, and they can't even have a quorum to be able to take a vote to allow us to come back in and do another event, because that's the big people ask me all the time, like, oh, how do you get access to all these places? What can I do so that I can get into these places? And I don't want to have to pay and all that stuff. And I
right,
tell them the best thing you can do is go and become part of the historical society, because
hmm
then you can help them and help them keep these places alive, and you will get access. And
hmm
then you can kind of teach the other members about what's going on there. And that's what we've done, working with a number of historical societies over the years. And they end up gifting you lifetime memberships because of all the work that you've done for them. And that's a really good feeling to know that you're playing a part in keeping these places alive. But they need more younger people. They need more people who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s to give up some time, not a lot of time. They usually have like
hmm
one meeting a month, one event a month, but
yep,
they just need people that can carry that forward and keep that history alive so that it doesn't die with them.
yeah, for sure. So what you've investigated the Barnard House that you talked about, the first event on the 12th. You've investigated there yourself before, yeah?
Yeah, number of times,
Oh,
probably 5 or 6.
what's your best? I know you call it data. What's your best piece of data that you have from the Barnard House?
So we've had a lot of kind of personal experiences there, a lot of physical experiences. One of the things that happens there is that the spirits like to throw pennies. And so we've had that happen while we were there. But the weirdest thing that happened there, and this is something that has happened every time we've gone there. I talked about Simeon Putnam, the headmaster of the boys' school, who was just a nasty, nasty spirit.
Yep.
And you'll be in the attic, which was where they held the classes. And when you're in the attic, there's a window at one end, there's a window at the other end. But for some reason, Simeon Putnam's spirit is able to make that room so dark you can't even see in front of your face.
Mm,
And you feel like you've lost all sense of time and space and where you are. And that's when he knows that he has you. And he has grabbed women, he has physically accosted people. I
mhm.
mean, it's a really, really scary thing, but not everything that happens there is scary, because we found that Reverend Barnard himself is trying to, help us complete that story. It's funny because one year we went there, and we'll also investigate the cemetery that's kind of across the street and down the road a little bit, where Parson Barnard is buried. And we were standing there on his grave and looking at the headstone, and I realized, like, oh, wait a minute, next year is the 300th anniversary of his death.
Wow.
And then I looked and I was like, and the anniversary is on a Saturday. So I
Mm,
immediately booked with the caretaker. I said, I'm coming back on that date next year for another event. And we did. And we went, we had a Simeon, Parson Barnard Day.
nice.
And it was between those two events that they found out this new information that he was actually trying to exonerate people. And it
Mm,
just led to one of the coolest nights ever. And what's cool about this place is it goes back to the Salem witch trials. You can open up the closet door, and they've peeled back the wallpaper so you can see every layer of wallpaper that they've had going all the way back to the 1690s.
that's awesome. I investigated a place in East Greenwich that just reminded me of it, and in the upstairs attic they had like a playroom, and the wallpaper was peeled back a little bit, and you saw like there's this old 20th century wallpaper that was peeled back, and then there was a newspaper, and then they used newspaper as wallpaper, and the newspaper was like 1860s, 1870s,
Mhm.
and then under that there was a layer of like you saw the floorboards from these trees that looked like they were like like just these massive trees. Like how you don't see trees that big anymore. This house was built in like 1690 something over in East Greenwich, Warwick East Greenwich line, and it was used for different things over the years. But I mean, it's just like the history out there is just that connection to the past, like those objects that are like that old. It's just it continues to fascinate me,
I,
and stuff
I'm
that
sure you've
are
been.
attached to them. Good.
I'm sure you've been to the Oliver Estate in Middleborough.
Um, okay, so I drove by there 50 times in my lifetime working at Bridgewater State Hospital because it's right around the corner. And I've yet to investigate there yet. I wanted to go. It's been on my list, Tim, for 5-6 years easily now,
I
if not more.
I highly recommend it. It's very active, lots of shadow people in the basement, but that house, of course, is associated with Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin visited
Really?
there. He was given letters by the staff that proved that the Oliver family was sending correspondence back to the British Crown, telling them of
Right.
all the colonist plans. And so he kind of exposed that family and ruined them. But to walk in there and to go to that closet where those letters were and put your hand on the door handle and say, oh my God, Ben Franklin touched this door handle. I'm walking where Ben Franklin walked. I mean, that's something amazing that, you wouldn't be able to do if not for the paranormal opening that place up for people to be able to come in and investigate. So really, in the last 20 years, this field, this community has done so much to keep history alive that I don't know that I know for a fact the Oliver Estate would not be here anymore if not for the paranormal. The town would have raised that property already and done something else with the
Oh,
land.
for sure. Yeah, it's right by right by. What's that? That's right by the main road there. Was that Route 44 or is that Route
Route
6?
44. Yeah.
44. Yeah.
Just a few miles as the crow flies from where the redheaded hitchhiker patrols.
Oh, really? No. Yeah. Wait.
Yeah, probably about 15, 20 miles.
Have you investigated the redheaded hitchhiker? That's Rehoboth, right? Have you investigated
It's
that?
on the Seekonk Rehoboth line. Yeah. So I went out there with Stephanie Burke and Scott Porter one night, just making some content for their Facebook group.
Mm-hmm.
And we drove up and down trying to see if we could get the hitchhiker to come into the car. But I think that that's one of those legends where I always talk in my lectures what I call the Liberty Valance effect. I don't know if you've ever saw the movie The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance.
No, I didn't.
So really quickly, it's about a lawyer from the Old West, in the Old West, played by Jimmy Stewart. He had moved out from Connecticut to the Old West, and he runs afoul of the gunslinger Liberty Valance, and he has to get into a gunfight with him. But he doesn't know how to get into a gunfight. So John Wayne, the aging gunfighter that John Wayne plays from, kind of behind Jimmy Stewart, is the one that actually shoots Liberty Valance. But everybody thinks it's Jimmy Stewart that did it. So he's hailed as a hero, as the man who shot Liberty Valance. And years later, he's telling the true story to a newspaper writer. And after he's done telling him the truth, he says to him, he goes, so are you going to print the truth? And the newspaper writer closes his notebook and he says, sir, this is the West. When the legend becomes fact, you print the legend. And that's what I think happened with the redheaded hitchhiker, where I don't know if the stories were ever true, but Charles Turk Robinson wrote about it in his book in the 90s, The New England Ghost Files. And now everybody who says that they've had a redheaded hitchhiker experience, I believe that they probably have. But was it really a ghost that's out there, or was it something that we've actually created with our minds because we heard those stories and we actually created this spirit, this tulpa, this egregore, this entity, whatever you want to call it? And I think that's just as fascinating as the idea that there might be a dead person roaming up and down the street.
Yeah, that's so we can create an entity with our own thoughts, with our own, or massive thoughts rather. That's pretty cool.
And that could be when we're at a ghost hunt, and we're all sitting there and saying, if there's any spirit here, can you slam that door? And the door slams. Does that mean there was really a ghost that did it? Was there really a dead person there that did it? Or did everybody focusing on that door expel enough telekinetic energy, psychokinetic energy, that we were able to manipulate the environment enough for that door to slam? And I actually think that that is a much more fascinating explanation, because if ghosts are dead people, we have to wait till we die to be able to harness whatever that is. But if we can do it with our own minds, we can learn how to do that now. And that means I never have to get up from the couch to pick up the remote control anymore. I can just make it fly over to my hand.
That's epic. That's a that's a thing. I mean, they do that kind of research on it. Was that Ryan Research Center in down in North Carolina, and they've been studying ESP and telekinesis for years.
And
I've just never had any. never had any experience with it myself.
Both the CIA and the military had remote viewing and astral projection experimentation, and
Yep.
so a lot of that stuff I laughed at back in the day. But the more I studied it, the more I learned, the more I talked to people, the more I realized that there's probably something to it.
Right, I was talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago about the Philadelphia experiment. That I thought it was just a movie. I didn't realize that was. Did somebody really? Did they
This-
really do that, Tim? Did they really make a whole ship disappear and then reappear? Or that's
Supposedly, yeah.
that's crazy to think about. What I don't know what they can do. That's just it blows my mind. But maybe it explains some of the things that we experience that we call paranormal. That's really just I don't know, something else. I don't know.
And that's the thing is, we don't know what our minds are capable of. What's the phrase? We only use 10-20% of our minds. But
Mhm.
what we really don't understand is what it's capable of when we take those blinders off of what it can do, because we have these limitations that are built into us. And if we don't hold ourselves back like that, who knows where it can go? That's why, some of these people who are autistic, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of folks that are like this, they almost have that sixth sense about them. That's because they don't have these blinders in there of ration and reason that we have, that keep us from being able to access these parts of our brain. So who knows, 100 years from now, human evolution could be completely different, and it could be no big deal for people to just be making things move and to be able to, what, I want to go to Bermuda today, so I'm just going to close my eyes and I'm there.
Right, right. People with autism are like phenomenal with math, in my experience. Phenomenal with like can do things with numbers that I can't do on paper. Forget doing my mind in like three
Yeah.
seconds. It's phenomenal. Or even like in that same sense, like a medium. Okay, not every medium is gifted, but I went to a haunted location, a location I've been to 100 times. I took two mediums with me, Sarah Gagney and Christina Marie. I had her as a guest on about a month ago. I'm like, hey, come out with us. I didn't tell them where it was. I'm like, meet me at this location, like a mile away at 5 o'clock. I picked them up there. They followed me to the location. They had no idea we were going there. When we went in the building, we walked around with the curator, the president of the place. It's a museum. It's one of the places I volunteer at, and they were saying some things about like certain spirits, and they were saying certain connections that the spirits had with the building or with certain events that might have happened at the building. I'm like, I have no idea. I'm like, it doesn't hit for anything for me. And the curator started saying, well, like the girl was saying, how there's a little boy up here and he was connected to a Halloween event that they used to have. And I'm like, I have no idea. I'm like, I don't know. And the curator's like, yeah, in the 60s and 70s, members of the town would rent the building out and they would have a haunted house there. So it's like, holy shit. The fact that she knew that, like she knew they knew a whole bunch of other details about the building, about people that were there, about spirits that are potentially there, about different artifacts and different parts of the building they're connected to. But like for them to know this stuff, to have that kind of connection to the universe, it's absolutely like I've had mediums tell me like my wife passed away 5 years ago, and she said I've had mediums tell me like what she said to me when she died. It's just like how would you know that shit? How would you know what like I've had a medium, Tiffany Rice. You know Tiffany Rice.
Yep.
Tiffany Rice. I painted my bedroom in my apartment like a purplish gray. Purple was my wife's favorite color, so it's like a light purple, and I did it for my wife. Now I knew that, and my mother knew that, but nobody else knew that fact. Tiffany pulled me out of a crowd of like 100 people at an Ocean State Paracon at the Plain Ridge Casino there, and she started like talking to me like she knew me, like well she knows, like we kind of know each other but not like that. And she says, when that color that you painted your room, she's like, Heather appreciates it. Like what? How would you know that? How would you know any of this stuff about me? How would you know what she said to me before she died? How would you know that? Where is that connection? Some people have that incredible connection, and some of us don't at all. Do you believe it's possible for all of us to have that connection, Tim, or is that just for the
I
gifted?
No, I do. I think that we're all capable of it. And, my best friend is Stephanie Burke, who's a psychic medium,
Hmm.
and we go back and forth all the time about this. But I think that people are capable of it. Some people are just born better at it. The same
Hmm.
way anybody that has an arm and a hand and fingers and an opposable thumb can pick up a football and
Hmm.
throw it. But not everybody is Tom Brady. Not everybody is naturally
Nope.
gifted Not everybody. I'll give you a better example. Not everybody's Tua. Not everybody can throw a football. So like they naturally have a better ability for it than everybody else, and they work hard at developing it and getting it better. And so I think the really good ones do that. They have that natural ability, but they just keep working at it to make it better. And then the rest of us just have these little momentary things of, oh yeah, I knew that was going to happen, or I had a premonition about that, or I had a dream where that I knew that was. So I think we all have those little moments, which to me shows that we're capable of it. But I didn't really believe in any of it until I was texting Stephanie one day to see if she would bring her table, because she does table tipping. I wanted her to bring her table to an event, and I was getting ready to text her a message saying, hey, would you mind bringing your table to the event tonight? And I'm typing that out, and she just answers me back with yes. She just texted me yes. And I was like, yes, what? She's like, yes, I will bring my table. And she's like, I was like, I didn't actually send you the question yet. I was just in the process of typing it. And she's like, ah, shit. Yeah, I can also read minds. So that's when I knew I was in trouble. And, you know, she could really read every one of my thoughts whenever we were together, or even when we're not together. So now I have no secrets from her whatsoever now, because there's no point in doing so.
Right. Like Carl Jung, famous psychologist, wrote about synchronicity almost 100 years ago. There's been this study about the paranormal. There's been this study about ghosts and spirituality and our connection to the universe for a while now. It's nothing new. It's nothing that exploded with Ghost Hunters or the other paranormal shows. I mean, they're great, but I mean, it's something that they invented.
They didn't even invent paranormal media, because if you look at a guy like Harry Price was doing radio shows in the 1920s and 30s talking about the paranormal and bringing microphones into Borley Rectory and trying to capture the ghosts on audio. I mean, and you can really go all the way back, as far back as I've been able to trace the idea of ghost hunting is back to ancient Greece, and Pliny the Younger writing about this ghost that haunted one of the bathhouses in ancient Athens. So these are stories that go back a long time, not just about ghosts, but about people trying to find and prove the existence of ghosts. And if they haven't found the answer going all the way back to ancient Greece, it's kind of foolish to think that we might be the ones to solve it. But at the same time, I think we're closer now than we've ever been.
Right. And I mean, it transcends different religions, different cultures. It's it seems like every major culture has uh, a ghost, or either a demon or something negative or something. Demons. What's your thoughts on demons, Tim? Is it a thing, or is the D word a thing, or is it just a negative, positive?
I honestly, I think it's all a man-made construct of religious dogma. That does explain something that is a naturally occurring negative force. So it could be elementals, excuse me, it could be negative spirits, it could be all these things that are getting tagged with this demon title. Even if that doesn't explain the original kind of definition of demons going back to biblical times, it certainly explains a lot of the quote unquote demons that people encounter now in the paranormal investigation world, because people are too quick to attach that name to something because it's sexy. Right. And I went through that working behind the scenes on paranormal shows like Haunted Towns, Ghost Adventure, Ghost Asylum, Ghost Stalkers, where you'd be writing, because my job was to find the locations and to get the history and to find out who they should interview when they get there. Nice. And I would have to send all those notes to the network for the network to approve the location, because before they spent the money to fly these guys out there, they wanted to know that it was going to be worthwhile. And I would always get the same note back from the networks that say, this sounds great. Is it possible that it's a demon? Is it possible they could find a demon? Can you send them somewhere where there's a demon? Because at the time, demons were huge on Ghost Adventures. And I would always say back, no, but that doesn't mean that they're not still going to have a really scary, intense experience. Right. I just don't feel comfortable throwing around the D word for something that's probably the spirit of an 18-year-old guy that killed himself. Like it just doesn't seem like you're telling the story effectively, but they wanted to have it because it sounds sexy. And television, this is what I think pisses people off about paranormal TV, is that networks and production companies, for the most part, are not committed to putting out an effective representation of paranormal investigation. They're there to create good, engaging television that has a dramatic arc. Now, you've got people that are better at that than others, and people who are who do believe that they can make the paranormal fit format instead. Guys like Rob Safi, who produced, he did Ghost Adventures and some other shows, and he worked on Stephanie and Scott's show, Secrets of the Asylum. This is a guy that gets it. He gets the way the paranormal goes, but also can find within those moments how to make it have that dramatic arc. He knows that the investigation and the information that they find is the drama, but people who are coming from TV that don't have that paranormal experience, they're trying to find a way to make the paranormal fit into what they know as the 3-act structure of a storytelling for television. And so that's where that dichotomy has been for a long time. And I think now that content creators are more important than television networks, you're starting to see the shift into being able to have a better representation of what a paranormal investigation is.
Right, because it's much more broad than just going into somebody's house or going to a location and shutting all the lights off and hitting go on the recorders. It's like so much more involved to like the research that goes into it, for example, or like the time that you spend like going from like place to place, like researching a person or researching a location, or doing a residential, for example. I like to get all the history as far back as I could on the land, and then maybe a history of the people who lived in the house, a history of the person that lives there now, their mental health history, their family history, everything possible. So, and then the countless hours spent afterwards going through. Not everything's like an afternoon in a hotel room with 2 other investigators. You're like, ooh, listen to that. Not everything's like that. It's usually spent over like, good lord, like weeks of just like reviewing video. Is some of the most like boring things to do, and there is like such a small percentage of time that there's actually something that like shows up on video. My bread and butter has always been audio, honestly. But I mean,
Mine too.
like it's not like even that. Like you sit there for like hours and just watching the thing go and listening and like just playing a game on your phone. It's just like
That, but that's
not.
that's where technology helps us, because now that AI has come on so strong, we can use that technology to help us with a lot of this. We can feed 12 hours of audio recording into an AI program and train it to listen for anything that is below the human register, or what sounds like it's a voice that's different than the people in the room, or whatever little programming we can give it to try to make it find those things. Now, is it going to be foolproof? No. But if it detects something and says, here, listen to this, and then you can listen to it and say, yeah, that is anomalous, it just saved you hours worth of time.
Yeah.
But then you also still want to go back and listen to it yourself, because you never know if it might have missed something.
Right.
Marty the robot walking around Stop and Shop is supposed to find wherever anybody spilled stuff, but sometimes stuff gets spilled and Marty doesn't find it.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a good point. I've never used AI myself. I find myself listening to hours of. I'll listen to it a few times, and it's just some of it's absolutely mind numbing. Someone will take like a recorder, just place it somewhere and hit record, and let it record for 4 hours, and you can listen to that. And it's like, ugh.
Can't do it. Can't not do it.
It's scary sometimes just to think about it. Just, oh my God, I gotta sit there and listen to this shit. But
I work in radio, so I only have so much hearing left in my life, and I don't want to blow. I already blow it going to concerts. I don't want to blow it listening to 4 straight hours of a very loud hiss.
you've been to, speaking of concerts, Tim, you've been to some. I've noticed some really good concerts lately.
One of the perks of working in radio is if winners don't pick up their tickets and they're just sitting there, I'm like, well, I'll use them.
Oh, dude, that's awesome. You went to Zombie a few weeks ago, yeah?
Yeah, this past Friday. Yep, Rob Zombie, Alice Cooper.
Nice.
Went to Green Day and Smashing Pumpkins. What else did I do this summer? Third Eye Blind, Alanis Morissette. Yeah, I love concerts. And
beautiful.
I'm lucky that I know people that work at some venues that sometimes give me tickets. And then, like I said, people don't claim tickets because they can't go, or because, they wanted to win something else and they didn't mean to win that, whatever it may be. So, I'm always the person that says, if there's ever any tickets that are left over, just let me know. If I don't want them, I'm sure I can find somebody that does.
Oh,
because I hate to see them go to waste. I hate to come in on Monday morning and they're sitting in the trash.
Oh, that's terrible. I get tickets to Pearl Jam next Tuesday at Fenway Park. No, my friend Joe, who his wife is in the hospital for the next couple of weeks, so he's like, dude, I can't make it. It's a free ticket. He's like, anybody who wants it. I'm like, oh, okay. So I definitely found somebody who wanted the ticket. Finally, after asking like 5 or 6 people, it's on a Tuesday night. It's a rough night for a lot of people. But my friend John was working. I'm like, dude, he's like, what do I owe you? I'm like, just buy me a beer, dude. Well, Pearl Jam at Fenway Park.
If I give somebody a ticket and they insist on getting me something, I'll say, buy me a t-shirt. especially now that I've, lost weight and an extra large actually fits me. I'll be like, just get me a t-shirt.
Right.
But
It doesn't cost you $100 to get a concert t-shirt anymore because you're not absolutely huge, or you can actually fit into them now. And yeah,
but the great thing about, being able to go to this live to live music and experience it is, so often I'm there with people who have won, listeners from the radio station. I get to talk to them and find out, what it is they like, because I'm the anomaly on talk radio. It's mostly conservative. I'm not a conservative guy. I'm a liberal guy. And I'm the guy that's going to come on at 6 o'clock in the morning and have no problem telling you about the paranormal investigation I was just on Saturday morning, on Saturday night. So, it's really, it's fun and it's different and it's unique. And I love my job, but it also makes it really hard to go to some of those weeknight concerts when you got to get up at 4 o'clock the next morning to go to work at 6.
Oh, I believe it. I believe it for sure. So you're doing the 2 events. You're sports. Any sports? This is usually a sports talk, paranormal talk, but we kind of cut sports to a minimum with BAM's out.
I stopped covering sports years ago. As I took on more work at the radio station, I stepped back from being a sports writer. I spent years covering the Patriots, years covering the Celtics, doing high school sports, youth sports. So I did a lot. There was 1 year when I was both the NBA and the NFL beat writer. So I was, consuming as much as I could. So now I don't really watch. I watch the Patriots games and I watch like Celtics playoff games or big marquee games during the season. But for the most part, I don't have the bandwidth anymore to keep up with stuff.
Right. I watched most of the Celtics basketball last year because they were a pretty good team and they ended up winning the fight. That was an absolutely phenomenal finish.
So much fun. I was there when they won in 2008.
Oh,
that was one of my highlights as a sports writer. But I do still watch WWE. I watch Raw and SmackDown every week. I don't really watch AEW, which don't tell them that because they're trying to get me some of the wrestlers to come on my show. But today, just this afternoon, I was recording an interview that's going to air on the show tomorrow. I had the immortal Hulk Hogan for 10 minutes. Yeah.
I know he came to the local liquor stores in Rhode Island last week. I was working. I didn't get out to see him. But that's all you get to meet. You got to meet the Hulk, or you're going to?
It was over the phone. I met him years ago when his daughter was putting out her album. He came to the Dartmouth Mall and she did a concert.
Wow!
And so I got to spend the day with him, Brutus Beefcake, Brian Knobs, and it's funny because at the end of the day, they said for everybody to go up into the manager's office of the Dartmouth Mall, which is like up the back stairs. And they were going to do the interviews up there. And when we got up there, Hulk's like, I'm getting a pizza. You want a pizza, brother? And he's like asking me, and I'm like, oh, Hulk Hogan's going to buy me a pizza and a Rainoni's pizza, no less. Yeah. So, but yeah, he was super awesome. He was mostly, promoting the beer on the radio tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I did get him. I was like, listen, before I let you go, I got to ask you, to do the gimmick. I got to ask you. And he's like, what you gonna do when the Hulkster and Tim Weisberg run wild on you? And I was like, oh my God.
That's great.
10-year-old awesome. Tim Weisberg is freaking out right now.
He what kind of beer? I'm a beer guy. I'm much more of a beer guy now, but what kind of a beer did the Hulk make?
It's a light American ale. It's basically, I believe he said that he's working with the company that makes Pabst. So it's going to be a very basic beer.
Yep.
But the idea isn't to break any new ground with the flavors. It's to kind of have the marketing behind it to kind of bring people back together. He said, so many people are wrapped up in I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican, I'm a conservative, you're a liberal. And he's like, this is a way for people to get back together and just have a good beer. And I actually was getting hammered by people on Facebook when I said I was going to have him on. They're like, oh, he's MAGA now. He was at the RNC. He's retweeting Trump. Of course, he had the problems in the past, the issues with his wife, and when he got caught, using the N-word, and he's apologized for those things, But not that I dismiss those things, but he really seemed sincere about wanting to make amends for it. And the important thing to me was he made amends to those people that he offended. So I've got to give the guy a chance for that. And, just because he shows up at the Republican National Convention, I'm not going to have him on my show. Most of my audience watch the RNC because they're conservatives. They want Hulk Hogan on the show. They don't want me on the air. They'd rather he was the guy on for 3 hours every morning. So, you gotta, just as I interviewed Hulk Hogan, I also interviewed Stormy Daniels before. So, hey.
Wow. Holy shit. Look at you, guy.
3 hours of her talking about her paranormal experiences with me. She she put her daughter on with me, and because she had to do something really quick in the middle of the interview. And so she put her daughter on with me, and I was her daughter's first ever interview of her telling anybody about what goes on in their lives paranormally. So fascinating show, mainly because I have them on Skype so I can see them on camera while we're doing this radio show. And her and her friend Justin, who does her ghost hunting show with her, are just drinking White Claws over like through the course of the night. It was so much fun, such a blast. And you can catch that on YouTube. We have that interview up there on the midnight.fm YouTube channel.
Wow, that's phenomenal, dude. It's paranormal experiences. No socioeconomic statuses. It affects everybody, no matter if you live in a big giant house or you grew up in poverty. It can knock on your door at any time.
That Midnight Society show. So my producer Michelle Freed was really the brains behind all of it. She was the one that was getting all of the great guests. But I would also be like, hey, let's get this person. Let's get that person. So what I loved about doing that is I like to say I had everybody from a porn star to professors. I had Stormy Daniels on. I also had Neil deGrasse Tyson on twice. These are the kind of conversations that you can have because anything goes. And there was a time when, because I originally took over Art Bell's Midnight in the Desert show.
Right.
And there was a time when Matt Sharp, who is the lead singer and the brains behind the band The Rentals, but was also in Weezer. He was the guy that, at the end of the Buddy Holly video was like, it's not so good, Al. So he was a huge Art Bell fan. And I found him on Reddit just posting about his album Q36 that he'd come out with that was dedicated to Art Bell. And I said, hey, I host Art Bell's old show. You should come on and be a guest and we'll talk about your new album. And not only did he come on, but he gave us music to use as the bumper music. And then one day he called me up and he's like, listen, I'm sorry, I've got some bad news. I can't let you use that music anymore because the record company wants it for something. And I was like, okay, I totally understand. Thanks for that. He goes, but I'm going to make an album of music, orchestral music just for you. That's going to be called Songs, Soundtrack to Midnight Society. And we're going to name the songs after all paranormal things. And you're going to help me name the songs. And so now there's a Rentals album out there with him and Nick Zinner of the Yeah Yeah Yeahs performing all these songs that were the soundtrack to my show. And it's mind blowing to think that 15-year-old Tim that was freaking out about Weezer, 16-year-old Tim freaking about Weezer 30 years ago, now has that guy making music that he's inspired by something that I made to create. It blows my mind.
That's insane, man. Yeah, that's absolutely. Yeah, you should. That's absolutely something to be proud of. That's amazing. Not everybody.
While I'm humble bragging here, I'll tell you the weirdest story for me in all of my time working in the paranormal.
Nice.
So my whole life, I was obsessed with the Amityville case. I found the book when I was a kid at a flea market, read it cover to cover multiple times, obsessed over the movie. Like I was obsessed with that case. And eventually I got the chance to go and investigate outside the house, not in the house, and do a documentary for Tubi and all that. But long before that, Chris Balzano was friends with a psychic named Jackie Barrett. And he said, Jackie wants to write a book with Ronnie DeFeo, the Amityville murderer.
Yep.
She's become his spiritual advisor and she wants to write this book. And I was like, great, I'll have her on Spooky Southcoast when she writes it. And then he called me and he says, actually, Jackie wants me to write the book because she says she can't do it. She's not used to writing a book. And he says, and I don't want to do it. He's like, I think you should be the one to write it. So I talked with Jackie and I was going to talk to Ronnie DeFeo and I was going to write this book. And then it didn't end up happening because Jackie said, I should be the one to write this book. I can't put anybody through whatever this dark shit is that I'm going through. So I'm going to do it. And she did. She wrote a great book. But so it didn't work out that I wrote it. So we ended up having her come on to promote the book. And we were trying to get a call in from Ronnie at the prison that he was at. This is before he died. And so the warden said no, he couldn't do it. He'd already used up all his allotted media appearances for the year. So when the show was happening, I just kind of offhandedly mentioned that on the air to Jackie. And Jackie says, well, yeah, by the way, Ronnie has a message that he wanted me to give to you. And it's like my whole world just stopped. I was like, Ronnie DeFeo has a message from Ronnie DeFeo knows who I am. And she said, yes. And he says that the message is for you to stop looking into the Amityville house because it's looking back at you.
Oh.
And I was like, I just became part of the fucking story. And it blew my mind because first of all, I'm a journalist, and as a journalist, you don't make yourself the story.
Right.
It goes against every fiber of what you're taught, but also like to think that the guy who started this little rinky-dink AM Saturday night ghost show has somehow gotten to the point now where the Amityville murderer knows who I am, has listened to my shows, and now the Amityville house entity is looking at me. Like, it just made me realize I can just die now because I've made it as far as I'm ever going to make it in this world.
That's awesome, dude. That's crazy. Ronnie DeFeo, yeah. The Amityville. I mean, that's pretty cool as a lifelong. That's amazing.
If you haven't seen that documentary too on Tubi, check it out. It's really good. They approach it from all the different angles. And I'm not just saying that because I'm in it. Like they really did a good job of presenting all sides and all the theories. And they also started bringing in some of the TikTokers at a time when I was like, TikTok, what does anybody have to say on TikTok that's any good?
Right.
But now here we are, 3-4 years later, and it's like, oh, that's where all the content is. Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. I'll have to check that out for sure. Anything else you want to push, Tim, before we wrap up this evening?
I think, I'll just put it out there that if anybody ever has any stories they want to share, any information they want to share, or just wants to talk Bridgewater Triangle, I mean, that's what I'm here for. The way I look at it is I had a line that I said at the very beginning. A newspaper article came out about Spooky Southcoast before it debuted. And in that article, the writer said to me, he goes, what is your approach to doing a paranormal show on a talk radio station? And I said, listen, if we don't take things seriously enough, people are going to think we're goofs. And if we take things too seriously, people are going to think we're crazy. So we gotta find that happy medium, and we got to have fun with it while also, trying to be serious about what it is that we're doing. And I've always had that approach, and it hasn't failed me yet.
That's awesome, Tim. So if you're interested in seeing more from Tim Weisberg, it's www.spookysouthcoast.com. People can find all your events there. The 2 events in October. Honestly, I'm going to check out the Oliver House. I'm going to get on it, Tim. I promise.
You've got to get there. Yes,
I got to get my team there. So check out anything and everything that Tim does. He's incredible to listen to on podcasts in person. I'd love to investigate with you, Tim. It'd be an absolute pleasure.
we'll definitely do that.
Yeah, certainly. For Tim Weisberg, for Van Down Weather Podcasts, this is Buddy Thayer for the Goat and the Ghost. The Goat and the Ghost podcast. Bams, good luck, Joey. Good luck. We'll see you guys soon. Tune in next week. We have Savannah, the spirit medium. I'm hoping Bams is on because I'll be at Pearl Jam. If not, tune into us the following Tuesday. See us here live on Get Haunted. You can see us live on Facebook, on YouTube, on all that stuff. So thanks everybody for tuning in tonight. It's been a great show. Go Dolphins. Go Red Sox.